I'm Scott Malevsky, and this is Interviews with Me.
Oh, Maine, your rivers, your back roads claim me.
This week, Chandler Woodcock.
Everybody has a value. You just have to find the value. A very strong believer in that. They may not know it yet, but they had value.
Because everyone has a story.
Welcome home to Maine.
My next guest was an English teacher and basketball coach for 27 years. He is also the former executive director of the Maine Harness Horsemen's Association. Did I get that right?
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely.
It was on the Board of Selectmen in Farmington, Maine, served 3 terms in the Maine Senate from Franklin County, which is where I'm from, and ran unsuccessfully for governor of Maine in 2006, one of his signature traits being his bow tie. While in the Maine Senate, he served as the Assistant Senate Republican leader, serving on the Inland Fish and Wildlife and Judiciary Committees. He is an Army man, Vietnam veteran, and a former registered Maine guide. He is still an avid outdoorsman and today serves as the Commissioner of the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. That is a mouthful. Please welcome Chandler Woodcock.
Good morning, Scott. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for doing this for me.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
I'm very excited. I love talking to people who do the outdoors. I recently did an interview with George Smith, and I could have been there for hours.
Oh, George told you he'd been in the outdoors? See, that already your credibility's lacking. Because I know George used to live in my Senate district. I know him pretty well, so he's a good storyteller.
Let's start at the basics. Where did you grow up? I mean, I know you're from Franklin County, and I grew up in Strong, but beyond that,
I was born in Mechanic Falls, which is just outside of Auburn.
Mm-hmm.
My family moved to Farmington because my father got a job with Foster Manufacturing in Wilton. I was one of the business manager over there in the box department. And when I was very young, so I've lived in Farmington for, as they say in Maine, almost all my life.
Yep. So far.
My mother was a graduate of Strong High School 76 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So
okay, so what was her name? What was her name?
Her name was Theone Fernald back
Fernald.
then. My grandfather worked at the Foster's in Strong. He was a machinist and a very highly regarded machinist. So they lived in that area for a while because he was a machine worker in Foster's.
Tell me about your mother. What was your mother like?
My mother, still alive at age 95.
Wow.
I always like to lead off with the stories about my mom by saying she was a Marine in World War II. My mother was a Marine in World War II. There just aren't many of them around, and there weren't many of them then. So, and I jokingly like to offer that when she called supper, we low-crawled to the table. That really wasn't true. She called me on that one day. My mother was one of the first generations of a working mother. She was a bank teller for years at banks in Farmington. So we had 2 working parents in our family. And that, back in the early 1950s, was unusual. It was a transitional time for that type of methodology. So ton of respect for my mom. My dad died very young. He was 48 years old when he died in 1968. He was an Army Air Corps veteran of World War II. So I had veteran parents, both of them. He was a manager, as I mentioned earlier, at Foster's in Wilton, and later moved to Knowlton McClary's as a manager up there, printing shop in Farmington.
Yes.
So,
sure.
Both working parents, and they did well. They did well for that time span. Great models for us. I love and have a ton of respect for my mom and dad. So
that kind of begs the question, you Marine and Army. How did you pick Army? What?
Because I didn't want to pick Marines. My mother and I always get a big charge out of that. We've discussed it. I don't think neither my mother or father were very tickled that I wanted to go in the Army. In 1967 is when I wanted to go.
True.
Because Vietnam was a hot spot then. And so they told me that they wouldn't pay for my college if I decided to go in the military. So I said, well, what the heck. So because I wanted to go in the military, I really wasn't a stellar student my first year in college. My father passed away after my first year, and I told Mom, I said, I really want to go in the military. And she said, I'd prefer you didn't, but I understand completely because I've been there. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't a choice of Marines for me because they just, in 68, had a little different reputation, I think, equally as forthcoming as they were in the World War II. Uh-huh. But the Army seemed to fit me better as a person. It wasn't a difficult choice. I enlisted. I wasn't drafted. I enlisted in 69.
Who were you close to growing up? I mean, obviously your parents, but did you have any favorite relatives or cousins or aunts and uncles?
We had a very close family. First of all, on my mother's side, a very large family because my grandmother was one of 11 children. So they were everywhere. They all lived 10 out of 11 lived to be in their 80s or more,
Wow.
I believe. So they were around with me.
Also unusual.
Yeah, unusual. They were a farming lot. A couple of 3 ministers in there, so there was a lot going on with her family. My father's mom and dad, my true grandfather, passed away reasonably young. Again, my grandmother, my dad's mom, married again. So he was an outdoor guy. He had a team of pulling horses that I used to ride behind, which I had quite a variety in my life. I was really lucky. But the closest, I would say, without any doubt, would be my mother's mother and father, my grandmother and grandfather on her side. My grandfather, her dad, was the one who taught me how to hunt and fish. I started fishing when I was 3, and hunting, I like to say when I was 8, but I think that was illegal, so I'll say 10. Back then, I don't want to.
So this was your grandfather that
my
taught you how
grandfather,
to hunt and fish?
My grandfather, yep, my mother's father, and my grandmother was a very religious person and brought me to the faith and changed my life. I mean, my grandmother and grandfather on my mother's side were definitely the people in my life who influenced me as much as anyone.
Based on that experience, was it your grandfather that kind of moved you into becoming a Maine guide? Was that like a natural progression
No.
from your love of the outdoors?
No, I don't think my grandfather was ever tuned into the guiding part of it, because in his generation, he was born in 1896, so his generation, although guides existed,
You didn't guide people, you
just did it, and you hunted for subsistence. You didn't hunt for any thrill of hunting. He just hunted, and my grandmother was a hunter. In fact, I still have her 410 shotgun, which is one of my really proudest possessions. But she and my grandfather hunted for subsistence. I mean, they put meat on the table.
Sure.
And you never did, Scott, but if you ever had my grandmother's mincemeat pie, you'd know why I hunted.
I have never yet had a mincemeat pie that I've actually enjoyed.
Unbelievable pie. Boy.
Oh, that's great. Tell me more about your childhood. What was your growing up like?
Yeah, I had a very idyllic childhood. I mean, I've told people I'm just greatly blessed when it comes to my childhood. I was raised by loving parents. I had loving family around me. Always had a place to stay. Always had food on the table unless I chose not to eat. So I'm not in any of the categories that cause you to have angst in society today. I really was very fortunate. I didn't know I was fortunate because I was a kid. I just accepted what was around me. My grandfather was a very accomplished machinist. He actually was the head machinist at Penny's in Mechanic Falls. They were the ones that supplied most of the parts for the Stanley steamer engine when it was originally built.
Oh,
so
no kidding.
My grandfather had an unbelievable sense of how to maneuver things to be repaired, to be refixed, how to create pieces out of metal. But he had a 4th grade education because back in his day, you worked on the fields as a farmer. Right. You didn't go to school. So he had a cipher book, a little black cipher book, which I still have, that converted everything for him. So he knew specifically what the decimals were, et cetera. But I'll tell you, by looking at something, he pretty much didn't have to deal with decimals. He was an extraordinary man. And my grandmother was a mom. My aunt, her daughter, my mother's sister, had a serious illness when she was a child and was mentally disabled for all of her life at the age of 5. And my grandmother kept her in her care for her entire life. So, the modeling that I had was significantly positive when I was a kid.
There's not a lot of that kind of modeling you see these days.
I lived with my grandmother and grandfather in the summers from age 5 to 15 because they had a camp on a couple of ponds down in Oxford. And I just went down there when school got out, baseball was over, and I stayed there for the whole summer. I didn't really want school to start in the fall.
Right.
Because every day, my grandmother, I remember her looking at me one day and said, "Chan," she says, "you could fish your life away, couldn't you?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, Nana, I could." And I think I pretty much have, if you ask my wife, some cases.
What would a perfect day be like when you were young?
I had a ton of perfect days. As I said, I had a great family. So if a perfect day for me would be fishing. Yep. I'd fish on the pond someplace with my grandfather. We used to troll Moosehead Lake and Sebago for hours each day. I was bored to death, fall asleep in the bow of his homemade wooden boat, and he'd tug on my line to wake me up and laugh. I just spent a lot of time fishing when I was a kid and with my grandfather. So perfect days, to me, were clearly defined. I was not a person who was unhappy very often at all. I mean, unhappy to me means I fished 5 hours and I wanted to fish 7. I mean, that's how idyllic it was. I really had an exceptional childhood raised by exceptional parents and family. I had a lot of perfect days.
Nice.
Still do, actually. My days are always pretty close to perfect.
What was the worst thing you did growing up?
That's a complicated one. The worst thing I did when I grew up, I hit my brother on the head with a horseshoe once. Ooh. We were playing horseshoe, and somebody came in front of us, and I threw the horseshoe, and he turned around. I hit him right square in the middle of the forehead with a horseshoe. I dropped my grandfather's fishing rod over the bow of the boat and had to dive down to the bottom of the lake about 15 to 20 feet. And I was swimming like a fish back then because we were on water. And retrieve his rod and explain to him how it was wet, how the whole reel was wet. Probably skipped school a few times. My mother got me once when I went bicycling away with a friend of mine. About 10 miles we bicycled to fish a stream. And she didn't know where I was. I hadn't left her a note. I hadn't left her a note. So she was pretty upset about that. I think I was grounded for a while for that one. But they were all pretty much related to fishing or the outdoors. My bad times were not really, I wouldn't characterize them as too bad. You know?
Yeah. As far as family goes, what were your favorite, do you have any favorite family traditions that have kind of continued on with you through the years?
We brought a ton of traditions along. I think this time of year, actually, the Thanksgiving, Christmas holidays are significant events in our family. We always used to gather as a family and present the presents to each other and open them, and we had a multitude of gifts under the tree. I've still got some great color slides for you younger listeners out there. You have to go to the encyclopedia online, of course, and check out what those are. But I still have plenty of color slides of our Christmas trees and how beautiful they were when we were young and all the presents underneath them. And the food was just extraordinary. We had a lady that we called our aunt, and she became our quote-unquote aunt because my mother was engaged to marry her son. Her son died in a fighter plane crash accident in Texas when he was training to go away for the Air Corps in World War II.
Oh, wow.
So we kind of adopted his mother and father because they were close to us. And they're a northern Franklin County family, too, the Day family, pretty significant family up in the Stratton, Kingfield, Eustis area.
Sure.
Outdoor family, Uncle Percy and Aunt Vesta, great names from the past.
Oh, yeah.
He died, wasn't around him a whole lot. He died when I was quite young, but Aunt Vesta was around quite a while. And Aunt Vesta was just the most loving, compassionate, mild person you've ever met, just a significant lady who was, without a doubt, one of the world's greatest cooks. I'm a dough fanatic, not a cookie fanatic or a donut fanatic, although I'll eat them in quantity. But I love the dough more than I love the actual product. So my grandmother and Aunt Vesta didn't use the traditional utensils. My aunt would put her finger in the middle of the cutout round circle of donut dough and just spin it and make a circle out of it, and that would be it, which ticked me off because my grandmother had a little glass that she used to cut out the middle of it.
Oh, and you could take that and eat
she'd
it.
Put it out. Well, you had to be careful, Scott. She'd put it off to the side of the cooking sheet she was working on, the board. And my instructions were, Chan, you do not go near me until I'm done cooking donuts because of the hot fat.
Sure.
They're very dangerous, hot fat. And she wouldn't let me near the kitchen. But when it was done and the fat was put away, I had a pile of about, she wouldn't give me all of them, but a pile of about 6 to 8 donut holes, which I could have, and I'm telling you.
That she didn't cook up.
She didn't cook up. She cooked up all the rest, but she left a little pile for me because she knew that I was addicted to the dough and the bowl. I'm still.
Oh, yeah.
Our kids are all grown, so we're left with our dog Baxter. My wife and I are left with our dog Baxter, but my wife's an unbelievable cook. I, out of tradition, still haul a bowl when she's done cooking so that I'll be the first person to get the bowl. But, there's nobody
It's like
else
the cooking
to get it.
version of Shotgun.
And I think I'm for the first one. Baxter may have had a couple, non-chocolate ones ahead of me. But.
From your childhood, whether it's from your mom or your dad, what are some of the lessons that you learned in childhood that you brought with you?
A ton of lessons. I mean, treat people well. I mean, that old adage of please treat people the way you'd wish to be treated. I was ground into me by my grandparents in particular. Yeah. Watch me very closely. Be aware of other people's sensitivities. If you treat people well, you'll generally be treated well yourself. And I think that is good political advice for the arena today. Yeah. Honestly, to treat people well.
We don't see a lot of that.
You never know on the elevator ride of life when people are going up or you're going up when you might be going down, and you'll need somebody that was in the elevator with you. So we were taught. We were really, that was ground into us. And also, I think without any doubt that we needed to understand and appreciate that hard work was critical. That being able to supply your family with a decent income when you had a family, being there for them when the time was needed, as a good parent, was also a great modeling part for us, and just an endless list of lessons of life that we were shown.
Let's transition into like high school and
Sure.
later adult years. Well, first of all, we already talked about you going into the military. What made you decide to be a teacher? I mean,
Yeah.
let me just preface this with, as far as I'm concerned, the military and the teachers are on the front lines. I would not want to do either because you're both in harm's way, and you've done both of those. So
Yeah, I
what made you
appreciate that.
decide to be a teacher?
And having been a veteran and a teacher, sometimes I wouldn't necessarily always say that the veterans are in the most danger because, when you have 115 high school students a day, and I'm not talking about literal danger, it's not the same analogy, obviously, but managing 115 teenagers a day, I offered my job to many people
I have trouble with one
who were
right now.
critical, who were critical of teaching. You need to do this. And I said, well, I tell you what, come on in. You can have my classes. Never once in 27 years did I have anybody take me up on that. So it was an interesting decision, career decision. I entered college as a math major. I came out as an English language arts major. So I never really found I think the balance of my brain was good. I don't know to what degree, but it really wasn't lopsided to left to right brain.
Yeah.
I never really thought about being a teacher when I was younger. I had great models for teachers. My teachers were unbelievable teachers. Many of them have buildings named after them now. Honestly, I mean, I had some great teachers. The Emory Center in Farmington was named after the Emory family. One of those teachers was my math teacher, one of the great wizards of my life, taught without a book. That'll scare you if you're a high school geometry student, I'll tell you. But it sort of progressed gradually into, as I became a non-traditional student. See, my college was split. I went 1 year in 1967, went in the military for 3,
Right.
did some other stuff, and came back later. So I like to tell people that it took me 11 years to get through school, and which doesn't sound appropriate, but it's a true story.
True story.
And in that last part of my life, as a non-traditional mid-20s and older student, teaching/coaching became a very important opportunity for me because I was involved with some great teachers and coaches in college. So I think that's how it transpired.
So math to English, though,
Yeah.
that seems like a different stretch.
Yeah,
To
and
go from one to the
looking
other.
back on it, I was probably a fool because math teachers, and I hope some of them are listening. There are some still hanging around. My math teachers, it always seemed easier to me to take a guidance sheet, and correct the paper. Just that's right, that's wrong, that's right, that's right, as it was to reading 10 pages of eloquent prose. But
More subjective than math. would be.
more subjective. And that's not the reason why I took up English teaching. I always enjoyed reading and writing. I love reading and writing, so for me it just seemed natural. And the exploration of our language was important and still is today.
Being an English major, what are some of your favorite books and your favorite authors?
Oh, I think the British romantic authors always attracted me. And I authored a book of poetry, so for me poets were important. I was a big fan of Wordsworth. I loved Wordsworth. And I think in today's contemporary writers, although I didn't get a chance to read quite as much as I'd like to
I
today,
believe
there are many talented young writers today in the science fiction arena that I think I watched my grandkids become attracted to their works. And I think when you're talking about the Harry Potter series, you're talking about a gifted individual I think she's done fairly well.
Oh, to invent that whole
In her
kind of a
in her
world.
life, I think she's done
Yeah.
fairly well. Yeah, made $1 or $2.
Yeah.
Unlike Wordsworth, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I don't think there's any kid alive today who would not know who Harry Potter was. So.
It's amazing. That different world we live in, though.
Oh, yes.
I mean, back in the day, Wordsworth was a rock star, but it was only because the town where he was in that day
Right.
was aware he was in that town. The next town over didn't, unless you had a fast horse.
Yeah.
So today, you are actually telecasting right from the event with all of your electronic cells. So
Exactly.
you can't hide. Today there's good and bad to that, but
Oh,
you
sure.
can't hide today.
No.
It makes it a safer world. In my personal opinion, it makes the dynamic of the 50,000-foot perspective a safer world because the children of Syria, for instance, maybe helped prevent some of the real concerns they had in their country for a while. That would never have happened when I was growing up because no
right.
one – we grew up to hate Russians, honestly, Scott. Russians, we hated them. We rolled underneath the desk every day at school for nuclear
The tests. The drills.
testing, drills.
Yep.
And people were building bomb shelters, and the Russians were racing to space. They're no different than Americans. They have a different language, but they still bleed pretty red.
Yep.
It's leaders who create wars. It isn't
Yep.
people who create wars.
Oh, yeah.
So, I think that's the reason why I'm comfortable in saying that these cellular devices, this connectivity today, spreads the wealth of how kind I can be to anybody in the world, literally on my cell. So the identification factor is there for children today. I think it's a very positive thing for us.
Yep. Moving on to more of your teaching, what made you decide to run for the legislature?
Nothing.
Well, first of all, did you start with the selectmen and then go from there?
Yeah.
What was the progression of that?
Yeah, I'm probably president of my class several times in school was my first attraction to leadership. I was a selectman in Farmington for 5 years and chairman of their board over there for 1 year when I was quite young. I think I was 34, 35, something like that, and loved that. I was participating in town meetings with the governor-elect's father, Peter Sr., when I was a kid.
Yeah.
It just progressed from there. I really didn't have desires to run for the legislature. They came to me. And being a candidate for public office, a good portion of it, and the higher you go up in the elected office, the more this becomes a truism. People don't know who you are personally. That
Right.
as you run for local town board of selectmen / school board, I've always told people, school board to me is the most difficult elected position we have as humans, because everybody wants a school system run differently and to define what well means to them. And you go downtown, have a breakfast with them, and they see you every day. If you get to be president of the United States, the only way we get to see you probably is on television. Yep. So the higher you go, the less we are aware of you as a person and intimately.
Yep.
So name recognition is really important when you run for public office. And in Maine, people tend to trust people until you prove otherwise. So if they know you and feel comfortable with you, they probably would vote for you. So we had some successful basketball years at Mount Blue. They won a couple state championships, because I was on the media quite a bit, and people knew me anyway from being there in town as a selectman, et cetera.
Right.
I was approached to run for the Senate because of my familiarity with that area. I mean, a lot of people knew who Chandler Woodcock was in Franklin County.
That brings up another question. You must have grown up with the Mills, knowing the whole Mills family.
Yeah, I did. Yep.
Yeah.
Governor-elect and I live half a mile apart. Currently, we never lived very far apart. They used to live in Wilton for a while. I'm a Farmington resident, so technically, back in the old days, we were rivals because it was Farmington High School and Wilton Academy.
Sure.
And then they merged into Mount Blue High School. So there's a lot of connectivity with the Mills family. It's a fascinating small world connectivity to me as I look at it. And I've been examining it a lot lately. Janet's mother was my supervising teacher, the head of the department at Mount Blue High School in English when I taught English at Mount Blue. She was also my supervising teacher when I was a student teacher at Mount Blue High School. So I knew her very well.
Yep.
I was co-officiant at her father, Peter Sr.'s funeral.
Oh, wow.
Paul is our lawyer, personally. I ran against Peter.
Yeah.
I've known David. I have a ton of respect for Dora in the public health arena because my wife was in the public health arena for 39 years.
Right.
So I don't think there's anything as far as connectivity that's lacking.
Yeah.
Janet and I have known each other for quite a while.
Yeah.
And, in a sense, for me personally, it's an honor, frankly, that a Farmington resident has become governor. I made that attempt myself. I probably will tell her when I see her the major difference between the two of us is you're a lawyer and you get elected governor. I mean, those are the two differences. I was a teacher and a coach, and I failed. So she is a very well-known resident of our community and has served our area and our state well. It's a great honor for Farmington to have her be a governor-elect.
Knowing people personally, and I talked about this a little bit with George Smith when I talked to him, when you know someone personally, it can be, when you hear things said about them that you personally know aren't true. How is that when you've grown up with some of these people and you hear some of the things that go on during this campaign? That must kind of get your blood going a little bit.
No,
Not
it
too
doesn't
bad?
either way, frankly. And the reason is, and my wife and I have this discussion quite frequently because her blood gets going quickly. She doesn't like somebody in politics. She's going to tell you. If I screw up, she's going to tell me.
She's going to be the first to tell you.
She said, I don't like politics, and here's the reason why. I'm the opposite. I love the arena, but I'm also and a person who's been in it a while, I think I have an understanding of an appreciation. So things are said during campaigns and during your tenure in public office that you can't take them too close to your heart.
Right.
You can't carry them around because they were said for a specific reason by a human being that may have a motive that's a little different than what
may have no idea what they're talking about.
None at all. So you really can't pay much attention to it.
Yep.
It's when you have somebody who is close to the vest come out and say something about someone that is a little more personal, that you probably might get more bothered by that. But the political rhetoric, rhetoric is rhetoric. People do it for a variety of reasons today.
Yep.
Most of them for serving the purpose of advancing in some way in the political arena. So
Okay.
I'm accepting of that. I'm fairly. I think you could say people around me I think would observe that I'm fairly easygoing. I'm a fairly steady personality. I think my cup is probably 3/4 full most of the time. Life is good to me. I've been blessed a lot in my life. I'm very blessed. So I'm not a person who gets down on things at all, nor do I pay much attention to a lot of the rhetoric.
Sure.
Because it's just that.
It is rhetoric.
No, it's not substance often. It's rhetoric.
So home is in Farmington.
Yeah.
So you still drive down from Farmington to Augusta
every day except the weekends, sometimes on the weekend.
Being an outdoorsman, what's your favorite? Is there a favorite sport, or do you classify what you enjoy based on the season? Because we have such great seasons.
I classify what I enjoy based on the season, but there's no question that fly fishing is my love. And fishing in general, because there are some people in the arena, our outdoor arena, who think I'm an elitist because I fly fish, I tie flies, I fly fish. That was kind of a progression to that point in time because I used to literally fish with a bamboo pole and a worm.
Well, you don't
and a
just
bobber
start
when I was a
tying
kid.
flies, and it takes a while to get good at it.
Unless your mom and dad are teachers of you when you're young, and mine weren't. So I didn't start until I was around 18 or 19 years old.
Yep.
I love to fish. Fishing's been the most important outdoor recreation activity in my life by far. I just have evolved to become a fly fisherman because it has the moving water around my legs when I'm wading, although my somewhat advanced age is beginning to get a little more unstable. I told my wife I have to be careful about how much wading I do. Yep. Is very soothing to me. Is very comforting. But with grandkids that are younger, the worm and a bobber is the way to go. Yeah. So I fish for everything. I love to. I grew up fishing bass. Yep. Love to hunt. I love to deer hunt. Deer hunt is high on my list of favorite things to do. I'm not able to do it. I couldn't deer hunt this year at all because I had too many commitments. So that's unfortunate. But the outdoors has been an integral part of my life's experience.
Yep. Where's your favorite place to fish in Maine?
Oh, I won't tell you that. No, that's a very personal question. So
sure.
Let me just say somewhere in the water. Fair enough?
Fair enough. I can understand that. I've fished a couple places. I've fished the McGalloway. I enjoy fly fishing too.
Yeah.
I've done that. I've done Grand Lake Stream. Yeah. I've been up to Baxter. I mean, they all have their own beauty. So
they do. We're very fortunate in this state to have all types of water, both moving and still.
Yep.
We have some great lake and pond fisheries. I'll throw in a plug here. About 96% of the wild brook trout left in lakes and ponds in this country are in Maine.
Really?
Yes.
Oh.
So we're a very
statistic.
special place. Very special place.
So my next question is regarding public politics again. What do you think is the best lesson you've learned by running for office? I mean, you've had success, you've had failure. What's been the best lesson you've learned?
I think the most important lesson for most politicians should be that in order to advance an agenda of any type, you have to be able to be a compromiser. Because it's very, very rare that you're going to have the ability to drive agendas. And the product of a driven agenda, when the other side doesn't have a chance to, no matter what the other side is, either way, if you don't have a chance to participate as a politician, as a citizen in the process, and you feel it's being driven down your throat, it probably won't be successful policy. So if you want to create sound policy of substance, you have to be able to work with all facets of the political arena. And I feel pretty comfortable in saying I think I'm able to do that.
Who's been your favorite person to work with in politics? I mean, obviously, there's plenty of people you respect. There are people you don't like. We won't get into that. But who is the easiest to work with?
Easiest? That's a hard question for me because I don't find anybody difficult to work with most of the time. So
that's great.
When I was a senator, we had a group of people in the Senate, both sides of the aisle, that I felt very comfortable in working with. And I'd be hesitant to name individuals. I'll leave somebody out. But
no, that's fine.
And the House of Representatives, same way. And I knew a lot of people, still do. Governor LePage has been great to me as a commissioner. I mean, I know he has an image in the public. I'll just put an asterisk beside who creates those images sometimes, but he's been great to me. I mean, he's very, very cordial to me and listens to what I have to say. And if he doesn't agree with me, you're going to know it in a hurry. And he's very consistent. I mean, he's been very consistent. If he says it's going to be a certain methodology, then you can depend on it being a certain methodology. And I think there's some value to that, too. I've truly enjoyed. It's been a great honor to be a commissioner under Governor LePage.
So, moving into your position now, was this kind of a natural progression based out of your being on the committee when you were in the legislature, or how did this
I don't
come
think
about?
so. No, I don't think so. So this is an appointed position, and appointments come in a variety of fashions. It may be sometimes a political favor, appointments.
Sure.
Commissioner can fall in that category sometimes in some agencies. I would like to think that you have some competence when you're a commissioner of an agency. So not only did I have a lifetime of experience and work on the committee, I had leadership in the Senate, and I ran for governor. So, as that is a background
experience.
And I was a Maine guide for a little while. So, I'm an outdoor person who also happens to be a political person. That seems to fit the definition of commissioner fairly well, I think. So I enjoy this job. This has been as I said, a great honor for me to be the Commissioner of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. And other than my family, one of my greatest blessings. To be able to work in an arena which you have been partaking in for all these years and have an opportunity to change policy and improve environments, and do all those things that would become important for the future of the outdoor arena. Not many people have that opportunity. As you were coming in today, I think there are maybe 13 commissioners total in the history of the department.
Yeah,
so to be able to be a part of that, I'm sure it'll have more impact on me when I'm not in the job than it does when I'm in the job. Because all I've ever tried to accomplish is what I thought was best. I'm not good at the political part. I didn't win the governor's race. I'm a lousy politician, Scott. So when it comes to being commissioner, I don't look at things necessarily political in the outdoor arena, because I actually think they should be nonpartisan, bipartisan / So I look at what's best for the resource, what's best for the state, and that makes the job a little different than some.
So let me ask you this about the job. I mean, when you take a new job, obviously you have expectations going in. What surprised you the most about coming into this position? Was there something that you weren't expecting? Was there part of the job that you weren't expecting would be part of the job? Was there something that tell me about that. Did something surprise you?
Yeah, it did surprise me. What surprised
maybe
me
the scope
was
of the job.
The scope and diversity.
Yeah.
I've been in the outdoor arena since I was a kid, but I'm not necessarily certain that I ever could imagine what my calendar would be like some days. And people ask me all the time, how do you enjoy being commissioner? And my response is, I absolutely love being commissioner. And the reason I do is because you have no expectation. I mean, I have a calendar.
Sure.
But if you think you're going to adhere to a calendar, you're living on a different planet.
Oh, yes.
Honestly. The variety that we go through from moment to moment in this job is incredible. I'll give you an example. Okay. You might be having a day where you're dealing with a policy that's come through the legislature and the governor wants to support it, and you're talking to the governor's office about it, and you're involved in a deeply rooted policy discussion, and Colonel Wilkinson comes up from the Warden Service and says, Commissioner, I just want to let you know we have a child that's lost, and we're searching for it right now. I mean, Scott.
Everything drops.
Everything changes.
Yep.
I won't say you get jaded to it, but no human being can escape it entirely.
Right.
But you also have to rely on the people who are in leadership positions in the department to be experts in their field. I think my leadership style fits well with that, because I've always felt if you surround yourself with people who are better than you are and just allow them to do their job, it's coming to you eventually. Yeah. You're going to have a great department. And I think that I've felt comfortable doing that.
What's been your favorite part about the job? Is it diversity of what you work on every day?
Oh.
Or is it the people?
Both. No, the diversity also translates to people quite often. So I think there are little bits and pieces. For instance, I knew that, I was aware of that, but it didn't sink into me when I became commissioner. I'm also on the Baxter Park Authority. Yep. So
along with Janet Mills.
The Attorney General, the Governor-elect, Janet Mills,
exactly.
And the State Forester, Doug Denico. So the three of us run Baxter Park. We oversee Baxter Park. Well, that's an unbelievable honor. I mean, to be a person who runs – and I had never been to Baxter Park. before being Commissioner of Inland Fisheries and
Really?
Wildlife. No, I'd been through it going to Soudenhunk when we were a younger
Yep,
family.
sure.
But they changed that. We changed the entrance over there, so you don't have to go through the park anymore.
Huh.
So I've never been to Baxter, and mostly because the area I live in, Western Maine, although it doesn't have Katahdin,
Oh, there's
it
plenty
has
of mountains. Tumbledown, Mount
unbelievable
Blue.
scenics.
Oh, yeah.
So you're naming mountains. I'm
Yeah.
not a mountain climber. My wife climbed Katahdin last year, which is a huge accomplishment for anybody, but I'm really proud of her for doing that. I don't climb mountains, and I'm very forceful about that. The only way I'd ever climb a mountain is if it had great fishing at the top. I just don't have a desire to climb.
Sure.
But to be in the oversight authority of Baxter is an unbelievable honor to me. Lands for Maine's Future Board, Outdoor Heritage Fund. The commissioner's involved with quite a few different organizations. Very enjoyable for me.
Let's transition a little bit into just family life. I won't get too personal, but how long have you been married?
45 years last June.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yep. Same woman.
Don't hear that too. Don't hear that too often.
Not anymore.
How many children do you have?
We have 4 children.
Wow.
And when we were having children in the 70s and up to 1980, when our last child was born, it was not in vogue having quite a few children.
Right.
In fact, we used to get, my wife, it still bothers my wife, people would stare at us in like almost a hateful manner sometimes, but what are you doing? Don't you know the world doesn't want to have population growth? And I told my wife, you let me handle this, and I'll be less than diplomatic, which is not my style, but what do you think you have a right to say about how many children I have? So we had 3 daughters and a son.
Yep.
They were all teenagers at one time. And as I love to tell people, and told you earlier,
I'm so sorry.
3 daughters, teenage daughters, and 1 bathroom in our house. So when people say, is it difficult being commissioner? I always revert to, I had 3 daughters and 1 bathroom. Do you think commissioner is really a hard job?
Is that really the priority?
I mean, and our kids are terrific. I mean, we have 13 grandchildren. So we have, we have a huge family. We get together, all 23 of us with their spouses twice a year, which is a carryover from my childhood.
Absolutely.
Of families being together. Yep. And it's just an amazingly talented group of people. I'm just really, and here's the words, I don't get to use this very often, as a patriarch of this family, which means not only are you the overseer, but you're also the oldest by far.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yes.
Yeah. And are we on the air? Hello? Are we on the air, Scott? My wife is 2 weeks older than I am, so she's the real matriarch of the family.
She's the matriarch.
If she hears this
We'll let that
broadcast, by the way, it's 45 and holding. 45 years and holding.
45 and holding.
Holding.
45 and
Holding.
We can edit out whatever you want. Do all your kids live here in Maine?
No, they don't. So our oldest daughter lives in Maryland with her family down there. Her husband's a lawyer. Mm-hmm. She's a soccer coach and mom. She was coaching 6 recreational soccer teams last year.
Yep.
And I'm going to brag here, she was voted the recreational soccer coach of the year in Maryland 2 years ago. And they have 4,500 recreational coaches in Maryland. So our daughter she's incredible with kids. Our second child, Seth, is the associate athletic director for development at the University of Maine. Oh. So he has a high-profile job raising money for the athletic program, is sensational at it, has made a great career for himself. He's sort of my political advisor. When I have a day when I need something run by somebody, he's one of the first people I go to.
That was going to be one of my questions: is who do you go to for advice?
Yeah,
And
he's the first one.
Yep.
Yeah, not my wife, because her advice is always the same: get out of politics. Our third child is a teacher in Farmington. Sarah was runner-up for State Teacher of the Year a few years ago. So she's an exceptional teacher. And our youngest child, is a registered nurse at Maine Medical Center, was an All-American soccer player in college. They all captained a college team of some kind. We have athletes and musicians in our family.
All but one live in Maine, basically.
Correct. Our oldest daughter lives out of state, but we just got back there from Thanksgiving. The world is so small today that when we have agency employees who travel to the West Coast and up in Canada, et cetera. The world is so small, you really can't say they live too far out of town anymore. We were in Baltimore Airport at 11:30 last Monday, and at 3:30 we were almost home.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a different world.
It is quite amazing where you
it
can
is
go
amazing.
in the amount of time. I mean, Portland used to be a day trip.
So for my grandmother, this is cool. So for my grandmother, I used to talk to Nana about automobiles because she said, I remember the first automobile in our town. Oh my gosh, Scott, this is and she said it scared the horses. That's what we remembered most about it. Was it scared? It's stereotypical.
Sure.
But this was in the teens, 1911 through 13 through 19. And it's amazing to be able to make the connectivity with your immediate family member with, as Nana used to say to me, do you realize, Chan, that I remember the first automobile and I've seen a man on the moon. Come on. I mean, really?
That's a big jump.
Wow. It's still a big jump to me. But.
Wow. I'm going to start to wrap up a little bit because we have
it's
like
your
5
show.
minutes left.
You can wrap whenever
Well,
you
yes,
want, or you
but
can
I
turn
need-
it over to me and I'll start interviewing you. You want to do that?
I'll need to be respectful of your time, though. So you have
Thank you.
such
Thank
things to do. What are you proudest of in your life?
My family.
Your family.
Without any doubt.
Yeah.
You know, we're put on the earth to have offspring and multiply, and my wife has been an incredible leader of our clan, and to have 13 grandkids down 4 wonderful children is just it's the biggest blessing by far in my life.
Yeah. Nice. I think we talked a little bit about, what have you learned from your relationships, lessons from your family and things like that. Over time, you feel everybody has a purpose. I feel everybody has a purpose. Do you feel that your purpose has stayed the same over time, or has it changed slightly as you've gotten older? How has that changed your view?
I'm not the entity in charge of my purpose. I want to say that right off the bat.
Sure.
I have a very strong faith. I know God will take care of me no matter what. I like to tell my wife, it'll all work out. It just always works out if you really pay attention to the rules of the game.
Yep.
I don't think that there's ever been one. I think it's been a moving palette, a wonderful palette for an artist. Yep. But I've always just trusted God to put me in a position that He wanted me to be in. So I don't really worry too much about what tomorrow brings for me. I'm going to be okay. I tell my employees around here, when I ask them how you doing, they'll say, I'm not doing very well. And they said, how are you doing? I said, well, I actually live my life in degrees of great. Not so great, great, and really great. But the foundation is that I'm doing great. I mean, half full is not even close for me. It's at least 3/4. And that attitude comes from my family. My mom's 95, a Marine, World War II.
Yep.
My dad died when they'd only been married 20 years, so she's been single for a long time in the prime of her life. And she's in a care facility, losing her memory a little bit. And I go to see her fairly routinely. And when I go to see her, and I say, how you doing today, Mom? She'll look me right in the eye and smile and say, I'm doing great. And I'm thinking, seriously, what are my problems?
Yeah.
What problems could I have? And she's doing well at 95. I mean, I can't, I'm not going to complain about anything.
Yep.
I haven't got time.
That's true. And it probably wouldn't help anyway.
It doesn't help.
What do you hope people will say about you at your funeral?
Yeah, I saw that question on your list. So here's my answer. This, I guess my left brain, right brain's kicking in here. I think God's going to look at me and say, next. So what they're going to say at my funeral, I was just being a little facetious with you there. What they're going to say at my funeral is that I hope that people would feel that I've lived a good life in the eyes of people and treated people fairly and done my best and raised a great family and participated in the community and the state and the country. I'm okay with that. They can say whatever they want at my funeral.
Yep.
I'll be watching, so
sure.
Whatever happens, and I'm not saying I'm taking names, but I've done a lot of funerals. I was a licensed preacher for a while, so I've done a lot of funerals and weddings.
That I didn't know.
Yep. It's always important to make people appreciate that the person who's there being honored has had value in their life. A lot of times, I think it's really sad when there's nobody left. You're the last one in your family. So who's going to give you value? So everybody has a value. You just have to find the value. And I'm a very strong believer in that. Everybody has great value. They may not know it yet. They had value. They did something. My mom asked me recently, she says, why am I still here? She's 95, okay? And I said, because you are teaching our children and our grandchildren, particularly our daughters and granddaughters, what it means to live life with dignity.
How you handle yourself speaks
to
volumes.
live life with dignity. When she says, and they ask her, how you doing, Nana? I'm doing great. And you got a kid who's 10 or 11, you see a 95-year-old, and they're thinking, this isn't really great. How can she say that? There's a lesson being taught. So, and she just smiled. She said, okay. I said, okay. If you feel that way, Chan, I'm okay with that. That's good.
Do you feel you've had an impact through your life? with the various positions you've been in? I mean, obviously you've had an impact on your family, but throughout your career and all that.
I don't get to answer this question very often, so I think yes. I think yes. So if you're a teacher for 27 years and you're still in contact with some of your students, I think things were okay. I mean, it's not perfect with everybody, obviously, but
Sure.
I had 3,500 former students, and some work for me now, actually. And being a coach for all those years, and being in the political arena, being a preacher for all those, I hope the answer is yes. I've tried. I've just tried.
Now, see,
So
I
I
learned
do.
something new about you. You were a preacher. I didn't even
Yeah.
get a chance to talk to you about that.
Yeah.
If this was to be our last conversation, what words of wisdom would you want to pass on?
You've got a whole list of things you gave me here. If this was our last conversation, where did I see that? I can't remember. Where I saw it. Hang on for a minute while I
Be
find it.
page 2.
Page 2. I know. I tried to answer all these things for us. If this was our last conversation, what words of wisdom would you want to pass on? So you're reading it right off the script?
Oh, yeah, that one I'm reading
All
right
right.
off.
Seek happiness, not fortune, and rely on God. Really simple.
That is
That's what
pretty
I tell you.
simple.
That's what I tell you.
Kiss.
Seek
Keep it simple.
happiness, not fortune.
Yep.
Because happiness actually is our greatest fortune.
So that wraps up all the questions. I do have a list of questions at the very end. There's a show I love called Inside the Actor Studio. I love these questions. Everybody's got different answers, so I'm just going to ask them.
Go for it.
I'll go for there. What is your favorite word?
Love,
What is your least favorite word?
hate,
What sound do you love?
flowing streams,
I could have guessed that one. What sound do you hate?
children crying.
What is your favorite curse word?
I don't curse.
You don't curse.
No, at all. No,
Other people do. We bleep it out, so I don't worry
No,
about that.
I don't.
What profession other than yours would you like to attempt? This is always a hard one because a lot of the people that I interview, they've done a bunch of different professions. But
Yeah, I would say minister. I almost was a minister. I came close. I was right on the steps of the theological seminary and decided that God didn't want me to do it. So minister, without a doubt.
Wow. Now, which one? Up in Bangor
No, in Boston, outside of Boston.
or Boston? Now, see, I'm going to have to come back and do another interview just on that. What profession would you not like to do?
Funeral director.
And if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you show up?
And I've mentioned that to you
Yeah.
already. I'd like him to look me. He is going to look me right in the face and say, "Next."
That's all the questions I have. Commissioner, thank you very much.
Oh, it's
this has
been
been
an
a
honor,
lot.
Scott.
I hope
I've
you've had
enjoyed
as
it.
much fun doing
I've
this
had a
as
great
I have.
day. I've enjoyed it immensely, and I wish you happy holidays.
I
You
wish you
too.
happy holidays too. Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
I'll
Merry
say it.
Christmas.
Thank you.
You bet.
Welcome home to me.
This podcast was created and edited by Scott Malevsky. Thanks to our guest this week, and a special thanks to Ellis Paul for the use of his song, Welcome Home to Maine. You can find his CDs, music, and touring schedule at ellispaul.com. You can also find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and iTunes. For more content and bios, visit www.interviewswithme.com. Thanks for listening, and we hope you join us next time.